You can tell the rad kids they can sit. I don't know why they're standing.
No, it's okay. It's all right. They're out there rehearsing. Being rad. Okay, the one other thing I'm going to ask you is if you'd please put your cell phones on vibrate or turn them off at least until the end of the evening. That would be good. Thanks. Am I leading off or are you leading?
You're leading off.
Oh, okay. Are we ready? We're ready.
Yep.
Okay.
It is 7:06.
All right. Here we go. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming this evening. My name is John Millay. I am the mayor of Berners Township, and I happen to also be the chair of the Berners Township Municipal Alliance Against Drug and Alcohol Abuse. So welcome this evening to Not in My Basement, the truth about allowing underage drinking. When deciding on a hot topic for its fall parent meeting, the Ridge PTO didn't have to think too long to know that the theme should be social hosting. The rising number of underage drinking parties in Berners Township, where parents are providing the basements and, in some cases, the alcohol, is leading to increased incidents of binge drinking, sexual assaults, and other injuries to our teenagers. Yes, right here in Berners Township. And these parties aren't just for seniors in high school anymore. Many drinking parties are starting as early as the 8th grade. Partners this evening are the William Annan Middle School PTO, the Berners Township Municipal Alliance, and the Safe Communities Coalition of Hunterdon and Somerset counties. These groups have worked together to assemble a panel of experts to address the truth about the parties that your children are attending and that some of you may be hosting. We hope that after you listen to the presenters this evening, you will be well versed on the topic of social hosting and the potential liability to you as a parent and the many negative effects of underage drinking. So, thank you for coming out this evening.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming out tonight. My name is Dennis Lobina. I'm a consultant for the Partnership for Drug-Free New Jersey. I have 3 children that attend schools in this township, this wonderful township. I have a senior that goes here to Ridge. I have a 6-year-old that attends Oak Street School, and a 13-year-old that goes to William Annan. The number one reason why I felt it was so important for this event and for me to participate this evening. Caitlin?
Hi everyone, my name is Caitlin Kordeski. I'm a health educator at the Berners Township Health Department, and I'm also the Municipal Alliance Grant Coordinator. My reason for being here tonight, I don't personally have children, but I'm also a very proud advisor to the Ridge Against Alcohol and Drugs Youth Coalition. There are a whole bunch of them in the back. And I want them to live in a safe environment and feel safe going to school and going over other people's houses. And it's a topic that they really wanted to address this year, is parents hosting parties for students. So we are going to be your moderators for this evening. The program's we're going to go over a couple videos. We have a little bit of information for you. We'll introduce our panelists, and we're going to go through a variety of scenarios. And then at the end, we'll have time for questions and answers for the panelists. So first is a video from SAMHSA, and it will give you a brief overview of the scene that we're seeing in town.
Pretty strong stuff. You'll see other scenarios like this one. We'll discuss them later on. But the slide we have up here now is one directly from a advertising campaign that our organization has running now in New Jersey called the 15-Minute Child Break. And basically it describes other drugs that kids in New Jersey are taking. But the one by far that kids turn to first is alcohol. Whether they're using a fake ID or getting it from home or their friends getting it from their homes, alcohol is definitely the number one drug that kids turn to first. As you can see, 50%, more than half of those seniors have already gotten drunk or have abused alcohol, and 68% have already tried alcohol before they reach the 8th grade.
If you live in Bernards Township, you may be familiar with the American Drug and Alcohol Survey. This is a survey that we do every 2 years with the 6th, 8th, 10th, and 12th graders. This is information from the 2014 ADAS, and it shows prior 30-day use of alcohol. The blue is the 12th grade national average, and the red is 12th graders in Bernards Township. And as you can see, just from alcohol alone on the left-hand side, the national average is a little bit under 40%, and we are almost close to 70%. It just shows that our students are drinking more than the national average.
Here we have some nicknames for alcohol and some of the paraphernalia that is used in conjunction with it. You have your short-term and long-term effects. But by far, the activity that is engaged mostly with drinking is binge drinking. And that is what we're really trying to stop and prevent kids from getting into. Excuse me. Binge drinking, the definition is basically, in layman's terms, drinking as much as you can as quickly as possible to get drunk right away. And devices like the one you see in the upper right-hand corner, it's a funnel, all right? It's a large-size plastic funnel with either one or multiple tubes connected to it, filled with alcohol, whether it's beer or a mixed drink, and clamps are released and everyone gets to drink at the same time, and it's a rush of alcohol that goes directly to your stomach, okay? Getting drunk very, very quickly. And then, of course, the ever-popular beer pong, okay? I'm surprised in so many big box stores, when you walk in, how many times I'm noticing the red Solo cups and ping pong balls are getting closer and closer together. Even some supermarkets, you can find ping pong balls attached in the aisles where all of the plastic cups and paper plates are. So definitely a danger and something that parents need to be aware of.
So other terms you might hear and might not know what the definition is. So pregame, we're going to pregame before the homecoming dance. And the translation is pretty much drinking before an event because you're not going to be able to get alcohol there. So the kids are going to the homecoming dance. They're obviously not going to be served alcohol there, but they want to get as drunk as they possibly can before the dance so that by the time they get to the dance, they still have a buzz and they can still have fun. Power hour, that is, again, usually another word for binge drinking, but it's just referred to as a lot of beer bongs, a lot of funneling, and a lot of, drinking all at once. And then social hosting is another definition that's extremely important that we all know. It's the reason why we're here tonight. You probably saw "Don't be a social host" on signs and on the flyer. But social hosting refers to adults who host parties where alcohol is served on the property they control. Through social host liability laws, adults can be held responsible for these parties if underage people are served, regardless of who furnishes the alcohol. And this is just another slide on binge drinking, referring to what is one drink exactly. And kids aren't drinking one drink when they're in a setting like this. They're not measuring out one beer in a cup. They're not measuring out one shot. They're pouring vodka into a water bottle and they're chugging that as fast as they can, and they don't know the definition of one drink. And so it's quickly becoming a problem, the binge drinking.
Long-term consequences, specifically on the brain. Our brains don't really finish developing into our late 20s. And the problem is with the alcohol abuse, the part of your brain that controls your decision-making, whether or not this is going to affect me later on in life, that gets inhibited the more you drink. All right, so it's a slippery slope. Once they start drinking early on, it gets easier and easier for them to slip into alcoholism. We found that most alcoholics that have already been through rehab, didn't get to go to rehab, or even passed away, they started drinking when in their teens. So it's an obvious result that if you start drinking early, it's a very good chance you could become an alcoholic later on in life.
And just as a note, according to the ADAS, the usual first age of use in Bernards Township is 14.
Very young.
So adolescent brain activity, just a couple quick things. A lot of this information is from our campaign, It's 21 for a Reason. A lot of you may have seen stickers or magnets, things of that nature. It's our Municipal Alliance's Spearhead program, and it just looks to teach adults and students the consequences of underage drinking. One of the biggest things we like to focus on is when students, they're in middle school, high school, and their brains are still growing, just as you said, and the alcohol doesn't help with that brain development because the brain matures through age 25, and it's, drinking during this time can cause long-term and irreversible damage. And there's many different sections of the brain that gets affected by alcohol use, both short-term and long-term. Intoxicated drivers, this is another thing that you saw in the video. You saw, kids will do anything to get to the next party. They'll make a spare set of keys. 38.5% of Bernards Township 12th graders have ridden with a driver who had consumed alcohol. This is both maybe an adult in their life or also students of the same age. And that's from our 2012 Student Stressor Survey, also taken of Bernards Township students 6th, 8th, 10th, and 12th grade. And drinking in high schools, especially in males, is a strong predictor of binge drinking in college. A lot of parents think, oh, well, if I can control the drinking, if I can have it happen under my own roof, I can see it happening, I can control how much they drink now. But what usually ends up happening is that student will get to college, they'll have access to all this alcohol, and they're more likely to binge drink there. And just a note that we wanted to put in, this is also according to the 2012 Bernards Township Student Stressor Survey. There's a very big link between sports and drinking in our town. And this is interesting because you pride yourself on being a good athlete, having kids that do very well in athletics, but drinking to intoxication can negate 2 weeks of the training that they just did. Players that drink are twice as likely to become injured, whether it be from still being drunk from the night before or even from a hangover. And a hangover reduces athletic performance by 11.4%, and performance is affected up to 4 days after drinking. So that big party that they went to on the weekend because they won a game, it's not going to help them in practice on Monday, Tuesday when they go to try again later that weekend. And this is one of the reasons why we wanted to have this presentation. This is also from the American Drug and Alcohol Survey, where Bernards Township students have used alcohol in the past 12 months. I think you can all see that. So at home parents knew is 42%, and at home parents did not know is 39%. That means that in Bernards Township there is a greater percentage of parents knowing that their student is drinking alcohol in their home. And use of alcohol at home with parents' knowledge is the third most frequently indicated setting amongst 12th graders after weekend parties and nights with friends. And it shouldn't be that way. It just, parents knowingly serving their students alcohol should, I'm assuming, be further down, if not even on the list at all. This is our final video before we head into our panel section. You watch that video in the beginning and think something like that can't happen here. This is a local story of something that happened very similar.
Mother arrested for allegedly having an underage drinking party at her house.
CBS 2's Emily Smith shows us how the party ended with a teenager in the hospital.
Tracy Harding's a 50-year-old mother arrested for allegedly having an underage drinking party that left a 15-year-old boy in the hospital. We saw Harding approach the door at her Monmouth Junction home on Homestead Lane, but she didn't answer. Police say it all happened Friday night when a frantic mother called 911 because she couldn't get a hold of her son, who happened to be at Harding's home.
She's charged with second-degree child endangerment. She faces, up to 5 years in jail.
The mother ultimately broke in and found her son lying on the floor, unresponsive in Harding's basement, according to police. He later recovered from an alcohol overdose. Now, police are questioning why Harding didn't call for help.
She was actually arguing with the other mother. there was a verbal confrontation at that point in time as to how this could happen.
We know Harding has two sons, one 15, one 17, and she teaches at Lincoln Elementary. School is not in session today, but the school district sent a statement saying, upon learning of the arrest, the employee was immediately suspended pending further investigation.
I can't judge her, but it's just an unfortunate situation.
I wouldn't want to hear one of my school kids' teachers doing that.
Police say the teenagers had been drinking vodka, beer, and other alcohol, all under the supervision of a mother and local school teacher. In Edison, New Jersey, Emily Smith, CBS 2 News.
And Harding is out on $2,500 bail.
So at this time, we want to call our panelists up to the stage. Dennis is going to introduce them as they make their way up there. We just want to make a point to say that we're going to go over these scenarios. The panelists are going to talk a little bit, but please hold all questions until after Ridge Against Alcohol and Drugs presentation at the end.
Thank you, Caitlin. First on our panel tonight, we have Officer Tracy Baldessari from the Bernards Township Police Department, as well as the School Resource Officer at William Annan Middle School. Also, from our Bernards Township Police Department, we have Detective John Neiman. He is also the School Resource Officer at Ridge High. Next on the panel, we have Scott Mitzner, who is also a partner at Mitzner and Mitzner Law Firm in Watchung, New Jersey. Scott has been practicing law for nearly 20 years, specializing in criminal and municipal defense. He's also served as the prosecutor for numerous municipalities throughout Central New Jersey, as well as public defender in Bernards Township. Next is Ken Frucci, a retired emergency medical technician from New York City. Ken currently serves as the instructor and training coordinator at Corporate Medical Emergency Training in Bedminster, New Jersey. Dr. Michael Silverman next to him is our next panelist. He is currently the vice chairman in the Department of Emergency Medicine at Morristown Medical Center in Morristown. And next up, we have Alan Pertel, the clinical director of Daytop in Mendham, New Jersey. Daytop Mendham is a 70-bed residential drug, alcohol, and behavioral health program. Alan has worked with the Municipal Alliance on several programs concerning adolescents and drug use. And last but not least, we have Raik Sudam, a partner in the Sudam Insurance Agency in Somerset, New Jersey. Sudam has 29 years of experience in personal and business insurance and is a father of 4.
I guess I already said that.
Each panelist will have a few minutes to introduce themselves, to tell you why they're here and what they can answer. Following that, we'll go through several real-life scenarios that have happened here in town or in surrounding New Jersey involving social hosting, much like the video you saw before. We ask that you continue to hold questions until all the presentations have concluded.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tracy Baldessari. I'm a police officer here in Bernards Township. I've been a police officer here for almost 12 years, and I just started my 4th year as the school resource officer at William Annan Middle School. And, you know, there's a lot of reasons that I'm here tonight and I want to be a part of this. I'm also the police representative to the Municipal Alliance. So watching the hard work that Caitlin, the rest of the Municipal Alliance, the students from RAD, that they do trying to spread the awareness and educate everyone on these types of issues, I want to do my part to try and get that message out as well. As the school resource officer at William Annan, I go into the classrooms a lot in all the grades to talk about different issues, and one of them being alcohol, other drugs, and mostly at William Annan, the focus is on prevention and being proactive. Luckily, there's not a lot of reactive when it comes to these types of situations. So being able to go in and talk to them ahead of time before it happens and explain what the dangers are, whether it's talking about the laws or whether it's talking about physically what's happening. I do that a lot with them. And by being able to be here tonight, it kind of adds to that because I can talk to them and then we need to reinforce that from all different directions. questions. So if the parents also know the same things that we're teaching the kids, I think that's important because then it can be reinforced at home as well. And there's a lot of things that we're going to talk about tonight. Hopefully, you'll take something away from this. It may be just something to, again, reinforce the things that you are already doing with your children. And it may be something that maybe you think twice about when you hear some of the scenarios and some of the outcomes that we talk about. So thank you for having me.
Good evening, everyone. My name is John Neiman. I'm the School Resource Officer here at Ridge High School. The reason the topic of this panel is important to me is because I deal with all the after effects of the underage drinking parties that occur in this township. Over the past few years, I've investigated numerous sexual assaults and other crimes that have occurred at underage drinking parties here in town. And my hope with tonight is that I could share my experiences with you, and we could work together to try to stem the amount of people that are hosting underage drinking parties.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Scott Mitzner. I'm a partner at the Mitzner Law Firm in Watchung. I've been practicing law for over 19 years, and I specialize in criminal and municipal defense. As indicated, I've served as prosecutor and public defender for numerous municipalities throughout central New Jersey, as well as right here in Bernards Township. I've lectured on drug and alcohol usage, criminal penalties, and liability. Finally, I'm a township resident for over 18 years, and most importantly, I have 2 daughters in the school system here, one at Ridge and one an 8th grader at Annan. Tonight, I'm going to address certain legal issues that are going to arise, or that may arise, both in terms of potential criminal consequences and also civil or financial liability. In a nutshell, in terms of criminal, you're going to hear us discuss 2 statutes tonight. The first one, which is a disorderly persons or misdemeanor level offense, has to do with offering, serving, or making available alcohol to persons underage. This statute also applies just to making your property available, whether you're home or not, with the purpose that alcohol is going to be consumed by underage people. Penalties for this statute are up to 6 months in jail and a criminal record. Much more importantly, as you heard in one of the videos we saw, is endangering the welfare of a minor or a child. And it doesn't have to be your own child, it can be someone else's child as well. In that regards, we're talking about 3rd-degree crimes or felonies, punishable by 3 to 5 years in state prison. Very serious, major consequences, of course. In terms of the civil end, I'm going to impress upon you tonight, and I'm sure the insurance, Rick from the insurance company as well, the unbelievable exposure you subject yourself and your family to if someone is, God forbid, injured based on underage drinking. And that can either be at the party itself, as we saw in some of the videos here, or maybe after the party if they're caught driving drunk, or other consequences stem from the social hosting that you've done at your home. Again, whether you're home or not. As we're going to hear, insurance companies more and more are what we call disclaiming coverage, which means they're telling you your insurance does not apply because you have committed an intentional act and you have made an intentional decision which has resulted in this injury. What does that mean? It means your homeowner's coverage is gone. Forget about it. It means your umbrella policy, gone. What is available is your home, your assets, your savings, all come into play. And the courts are leaning more and more in that direction where it will be you held responsible and insurance companies will be out of the picture. And keep in mind, this will be over your head for quite some time because statute of limitations is 2 years from when that injured person becomes 18. So this could hang over your head for 5, 6 years, given the circumstances. I look forward to a spirited discussion tonight and to answering all of your questions as well. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for having me on board tonight. The company I'm in, I'm sure we have a lot of great experts here tonight. My name is Ken Frucci, and I'm a retired New York City paramedic. This topic, when I was asked to speak, kind of hit home with me for 2 main reasons. One, I saw a lot of trauma when I was a paramedic in New York. A lot of motor vehicle trauma, a lot of drunk driving. Was usually first on the scene when accidents happened, and unfortunately have seen some death resulting from it. And some of what I've seen have not just been legal drinking with adults. I have had patients that were teenagers that were under 18 that I have personally treated for alcohol intoxication. It was a common thing for us to see it And I'm sure it happens even today. You can ask anyone in the EMS medical field and they'll tell you the same thing. Currently, I teach professionally. I own a safety training and compliance company here in town, and we do a lot of health and wellness and safety and training, and this is definitely along that line of what we do. And the second reason that hit home was my wife and I have a 12-year-old who's enrolled in WAMS, and this issue is certainly going to hit home with us when the time comes for us to bring it up to our daughter and start talking to her about the effects of alcohol as those years come. And with my experience, I certainly hope that none of you have to experience anything with your children or any family members, and that tonight we learn everything we need to know to hopefully prevent further tragedies. Thank you.
Hi, Mike Silverman. I'm an emergency physician at Morristown Hospital and the vice chair there. And like Ken and like Scott, I live in town and have children that have gone. My daughter just finished Ridge, graduated last year, and have 3 other children currently going through the school system, including Ridge and WAMS. And I get it. I have kids here. I understand. I also get the fact that this stuff's dangerous. One statistic that was mentioned is over 1 in 3 kids have been in a car with an intoxicated driver. What might not have been mentioned is that the #1 cause of death in school-age children is trauma, and a lot of that is secondary to either a driver or them being involved in alcohol-related accidents. And for me, I never ever have to tell another parent that the kid has died or the kid has a broken neck and will never walk again. It will not be soon enough.
As I was, excuse me, my introduction, Ellen Pertel. I wanted to be here tonight because I wanted to come to a town that's really honest. I don't live here. I live in Chatham where nobody drinks and the children are all perfect. We're better at lacrosse, but I'll move on. Sorry. I've probably worked with over 2,000 children by now, and the kids that come from our communities are coming in for alcohol, they're coming in for heroin. Very little in between, okay? We are taking, the kids we're taking in now are trending a lot younger. It is not too much sadder than signing a 13-year-old into rehab, right? The mothers cry, the father's jaws just set and don't move again for the hour or so that they're with me. You know, I look in their eyes and I say, I'm a parent, I'm going to look after your child. Right? I consider part of my job description to love your kid, because when they are with me, they are my children. Right? That said, none of you want to meet me, and I don't want to meet any of you. I mean, here socially is fine, but and I'm living the fresh hell of raising teenagers myself, so I understand. You know, I have now a 20-year-old, and he tells me he's close enough to the drinking age. I disagree. And I have a soon-to-be 16-year-old. I have a boy and a girl. And I know what the pressures are. I know I'm not the cool mom. My kids hate having the mother who runs a rehab. You can imagine how many parties are at my house. None. You know, I don't think even my family likes to come over. But it isn't just peer pressure. You know, they don't the athletes don't think about, oh, well, I won, I should sell, you know, this might really mess up my game. I might negate a couple of weeks of practice. They don't care. A lot of times they don't know, but they don't really care. They care about the peer pressure. They care about the sense of entitlement that they are owed the party because they, and we did this by giving them a trophy every time they showed up. Yeah, you know, we've created the monsters. People ask me all the time, is weed a gateway drug? No, I think that the definition of a gateway drug, as I have redefined it, so this is not anything you'll see at SAMHSA, is the substance that makes you emboldened to try something else because, you know what, I tried that and nothing too bad happened. So in our communities, alcohol is the gateway drug, make no mistake. And part of the reason we see it is because parents are hosting, is because we as parents are drinking. You know, St. Bernards have St. Bernards. They're not going to have schnauzers. You know, you are drinking and partying hard, your kid's going to be doing the same thing because, well, they're doing it, they're fine. Right? They don't understand that their brain is still maturing. And we'll be talking a little bit about sexual abuse and sexual assault later. That is another whole level of ugly that comes with alcohol. Okay, so thank you so much for having me. It's really a privilege to be here.
Yes, good evening. My name is Reich Saddam. I'm a partner in the Saddam Insurance Agency. We are insurance counselors, independent insurance counselors, and I'm also a father of 4. My kids are all out of the terrible teens. Actually, they're all out of the house.
No wonder you're relaxed.
But I'm here to talk about your homeowner's insurance, and you purchased that insurance to prevent or dissuade financial ruin or financial disaster. But as we just heard from our attorney on the dais here this evening, that there are exclusions, such as any intentional act. As in our first video, that mother intentionally allowed the drinking. There are exclusions to your homeowner's policy, and you need to be aware of that. Another one is anything to do with a vehicle. If a child, unbeknownst to you, consumes alcohol at your home and gets injured outside, falls down the steps, yes, there'll be some coverage there. They get into a vehicle, no coverage. So there are nuances to your homeowner's policy, and not every homeowner's policy is the same. So I encourage you to look at it. We have a lot of information at the table outside. I encourage you to stop by and see it. But one in particular, since we were talking about some teen driving as well, is we have a contract. We've done this panel a couple of times. We have a contract between you, the parent, and your teenager about drinking and driving. And I encourage you to stop and pick one up. It's a 2-pager. It's a good deal to have that frank conversation with your child. I encourage you to pick one up. Thank you.
All right, so we're going to get started on the scenarios.
Number 1, your child hosts a party with your supervision. You provide beer, but you do not check on the party in your basement. You learn that many children are drunk. Some parents start calling to get their kids, but one child calls from the party to report she has been sexually assaulted. The police arrive. What happens?
Okay, so what would happen in that case is patrol would arrive on the scene. They would investigate the party that was going on, and they would deal with the victim as well. At that point, they would contact the detective to come in to deal with the victim of the sexual assault. Unfortunately, I have some experience with this from parties that happened in this town. And at that point, we talk to the victim. We go through a sexual assault response team script with the victim. And in that, we'll offer them the chance to have a rape trauma advocate come out, and also the opportunity to have a sexual assault nurse examiner examine them at a hospital. For this county, it's Somerset Medical Center. I would transport them to the hospital if that's what they wanted, to have a forensic exam done to be used later on in the prosecution of the sexual assault. And that's the end of the victim. The end of the victim's, that's not the end of the victim's day there. Then we would go back to headquarters and I would interview the victim about the sexual assault. After the victim was interviewed, then we would move on to the suspect of the sexual assault and interview the suspect and hopefully get a confession if that's the case. And talking about that and the repercussions, Scott had talked about felonies and misdemeanors. The sexual assault, this would be something that would be termed a felony or an indictable crime in New Jersey, and that person would be charged at Superior Court level. In terms of the homeowner, they would be charged, like Scott explained to you earlier, with hosting an underage drinking party, 2C3317A. And that's basically what happens in these circumstances. And I'm only covering the criminal aspects of this. The greater impact, as she said earlier, is the social and emotional aspect of this. It's really difficult seeing these girls in such pain over an incident that occurred at a party. And I just want you guys to be aware that this stuff happens in town. When people are hosting parties, it's not just fun and games. Oh, the kids are learning to go off to college, so they're prepared to drink in college. That's not what's happening at these parties. There's numerous sexual assaults and other criminal incidents that are occurring here.
From a legal point of view, in terms of the person who has committed the sexual assault, it doesn't matter if you're a juvenile, if you're an adult, you've committed a sexual assault. Now, sexual assault, a lot of people, especially young people, think it requires excessive physical force or exertion or holding someone down or some type of affirmative act like that. The reality is, a female who is intoxicated cannot consent, pure and simple. And any person, again, if you're 15, 17, or an adult who takes advantage of that situation is guilty of sexual assault. And if the police can prove it and the prosecutor can prosecute it, you're going to have a kid who may be 15 who's going to be, number one, facing incarceration, number two, facing Megan's Law registration for the rest of their life. Okay, so let's get rid of that right there. It does not have to be a physical force. An intoxicated person cannot consent. Number two, we talk about the homeowner. Are they liable? Absolutely. Are they criminally liable? Absolutely. They are in serious, serious trouble here. At a bare minimum, according to this scenario, they provided the alcohol. Guilty right away of the misdemeanor disorderly persons offense, up to 6 months in jail, criminal record. Third degree endangering, as we saw in the video, absolutely. These are not myths. These are not things that possibly are there just to threaten people. You saw it. South Brunswick charged it. That's the next county over. This is a very real likelihood. Somerset County, just so you know, the county we all live in, is known as the toughest criminal county in the state of New Jersey. It is a great county to live in. It is a horrible county to get in trouble in, okay? We talk about second degree endangering. Where do we see that now? You're a parent or just an adult, and you're driving intoxicated with minors in the vehicle. That is now charged as second degree endangering the welfare of a minor, 5 to 10 years. If you have 2 kids in the car, as a client of mine does right now, he's looking at 10 to 20 years. Okay, that's the climate in which we live. We have a very tough prosecutor's office here. Civil liability? Absolutely. There's going to be a lawsuit. Here you have intentionally provided the alcohol. There's your intentional act that Reich spoke of before. Your homeowners is gone, your umbrella is gone. It's a major situation here, criminally and civilly.
Okay, so what happens when they get to the emergency department? Well, the good news is I don't see the kids here because I work in a different county. However, my county sees probably as much, if not more. And just so you understand what happens, we talked about the interview, then we talk about evidence collection, is what's done in the emergency department. And not to be too crass, but if there's a hole, it's probed and examined for evidence, not something that after an emotional situation is really a fun time. So that's the physical part. Blood work is done, and then the concern for diseases. We may or may not know who the assailant is. A lot of times you do in this type of case, but again, how well do you know them, and are there any potential diseases? So besides blood work, we're testing for those and automatically treating for some of them. So on medicines they don't necessarily want or need to be on, and again, could have potentially diseases like HIV or AIDS that they have for the rest of their life. So this is not something to joke about.
Having been a licensed therapist for a while, there are a lot of things I've heard and a lot of stories I've heard, and I wear Teflon to work, as I imagine Dr. Silverman does too. You have to, because if it gets in, you can't help anybody. But every time I hear another story of what happens to these girls, it's hard to hear. And as the mother of a teenage girl, sometimes it's even harder, because for that little flash, I think of my own daughter in that situation and just get that visceral, Mom, I think I want to go kill somebody feeling. But I don't think there's too many of my girls in the facility now that haven't been victims of sexual assault, and some of them even victims of sex trafficking. Because once somebody figures out how to use somebody, they pass them along. And watching that video before, and it might have seemed over the top to some people, the first one, where, okay, now the kids throw their keys in and, we think Mom's got all the keys. I'm sitting there thinking, yep, somebody's got spare keys. Maybe I'm just cynical because I grew up in the Bronx, but it's somebody has extra keys. Okay, when is the sexual assault going to happen? Because it surely will. It surely will. The after effects of that, these girls, and the part that I liked that they showed was that the kid had his cell phone. I'm sure most of you noticed that. You know, he walked out with this. I worked with a young lady a number of years ago, not from this town, that was at a party, and she was young and she didn't know any better, but he was cute and her friends were all there and the whole bit, and she was lonely and her parents were getting divorced, and, you know, add all those things together, and she ends up passed out on top of the coats. And some of the fine young men, note plural, decided to, you know, have their way with her. They filmed it. They sent the video around the school. And when she walked into school, she was the whore, right? Flat out unconscious. And she went on to heroin because that pain, she couldn't kill it with alcohol. And she ended up using a great deal of heroin, got clean, went back to it, got clean, you know, relapse, remit. That's what happens with heroin. A third will die, a third will get clean, and a third will go into a relapse, remit pattern, which, you know, isn't living as far as I'm concerned. But all because when she was 14, somebody took advantage of her when she was drunk. If you want your daughter groped, by all means, send her to a party where there's alcohol. It will happen. It does happen. And some of them, I'm not saying it's against their will, but they're so young to begin with. They see the social media that says, oh, this is how I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be free and, you know, free and easy with my body, and it's okay. And, you know, we fight the fight every morning. Pull that and that, go back in and change. You are not leading with your body today, Missy. Oh, you know, I'm the uncool mom. That's okay, I can live with it. But things happen with alcohol, and girls make accusations, false accusations against young men when the next morning they're sober and they get embarrassed, or they, you know, hear somebody's talking about them. Oh, well, he raped me. You warn your sons too, because there's a lot of complicated things happen around alcohol. Very tough to work through all of that. These stories would make you cry.
Can I add one more thing to that?
Of course.
Before you go?
Yes.
And that's an excellent point. And just to add to that in terms of numbers, about 1/3 of sexual assault victims suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, and over 20% try to commit suicide.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, how's your homeowner's policy going to respond to that? Who's going to write the check if it's your fault? Well, let's go back to intentional act. If it's intentional, there's no coverage. You're going to write that check yourself when you're found guilty. Now, the other part of this, insurance companies aren't going to be emotional about it either, by the way. The other part is who was the perpetrator? Who did the act? Was it someone from your household? Was it your son? If so, he is what's known as a named insured on your policy. There's no coverage. You can't sue, you can't collect on yourself for an intentional act. Okay, it was a guest. It wasn't a family member who was the perpetrator. Okay, now your insurance policy is going to respond. It will defend you, and probably, depending on the form your policy is written on, pay any penalties. So going right back to finding out exactly what your policy covers. But I'll tell you this, if it's a member of your household that's a perpetrator, no coverage. Intentional act, that you allowed it to happen, no coverage. So the details are, where is the coverage and how much?
Just real quick before we go on to the second scenario, just to add to something that I know was already mentioned a couple times, but to really stress it, because we focus a lot on, and I think I do as a parent also, with, you know, we talk to our girls about going to these parties and being careful and watching out for each other. And as it was mentioned, it's talking to the sons too, and making sure that they understand fully what their responsibility and what the consequences could be to them if they get involved with someone, you know, with their drinking, or if the person that they're with is drinking. So I think that conversation needs to be had, and it's one that I don't think is happening as much as the one with the girls.
So the next scenario, your child hosts a party with your supervision. Kids are drinking and you don't mind. You don't know a kid passes out, but their friend can't wake them up, so they call 911 because they don't know what to do. So the police arrive. If this same situation happens and you're not home, what happens when the police arrive?
Okay, so we're going to start out with you are home, or the parent is home when something like this happens, and In our town, as most of you know, we have volunteer EMTs, so the first to arrive are generally going to be the police that are on patrol. Our first and foremost concern is going to be the patient, the person that someone called 911 for. Couple different things, depending on, just to give you an example, like let's say parent answers the door and has no idea that someone called 911 or that anything's wrong. That could happen. You know, if you answer the door and say, oh, I didn't know anybody called 911, well, they did, so we're obviously going to further investigate that. Or it could be where a parent answers and says, you know what, everything's fine, the kid's overreacted, they called 911, but everything's okay. That call has already been made, and in this situation, somebody's reported that somebody needs medical attention. We're going to, like I said, we're going to make sure that that's what's going on. We're going to make sure that that person, we have to make sure that they're okay. So that's going to be the first thing. So when we go in and we're going to provide that initial medical attention until the EMTs arrive. And then once it's turned over to them, if the patient is transported to the hospital, then the investigation is going to continue with what's going on in the home. So the questions are going to be, obviously, if that child is suffering from some type of alcohol poisoning, where did that alcohol come from? You know, in this particular scenario, we have that the child is hosting a party with the supervision. So clearly in this type of situation, the parent knows what's going on, knows whether they provided the alcohol or they know that there's alcohol there. So in this case, we are looking at the 2C statute for providing alcohol to minors. So obviously Scott's going to talk about the consequences of that and the legal repercussions, but then in this particular case, there's also the civil liabilities. So I'll let him go over more of that.
Yeah, again, as a parent, you've placed yourself in a horrible position here, and I am a defense attorney, so I'm going to put this out there. Police show up at your door. You know if you let those police in, you've done something wrong. You're potentially going to get charged, your kid's going to get in trouble, other kids are getting in trouble. Do you let them in or not? That's a tough call. Now you've got a kid who's injured, potentially, who's passed out. First of all, in this situation, you're not going to get to make that decision because the police do not need a warrant. They do not need your consent. They do not need anything if there are what are called exigent or emergency circumstances. And a 911 call about a passed out individual, police can push you right out of the way and say, we're coming in, we're going to help that child. And I would certainly hope they would. Okay? Other situations, you're in that horrible bind. Do you let the police in or not? And that's a situation, don't put yourself in. In this case, as Tracy said, you are liable criminally. There's no question about it. I don't care if you provided the alcohol or not, and more important than me not caring, the law doesn't care. You have allowed a situation to occur. You have made your property available for underage drinking. Right there, you're guilty of the misdemeanor or disorderly persons offense. If someone is seriously injured, God forbid, it becomes the third degree, the endangerment. The answer to this scenario is don't put yourself in this situation and don't let your kids put you in this by manipulating you or even attempting to. You are the parent. Be smart. Now, I do want to touch on something else here. The kid passes out. Call 911. Don't do the stupid thing and tell your kids, call 911. There are protections in the law. And we hear recently about Governor Christie, 2 years ago, signing the Overdose Protection Act, which has to do if someone overdoses on drugs and someone who may have been shooting up with them or using drugs with them calls the police, that person is generally immune from prosecution. There is also a lesser known provision in the underage alcohol consumption or possession statute, which states if your son is drinking or daughter drinking with someone, and that person overdoses or passes out, whatever the case may be, and your son or daughter calls the police, they can be immune from prosecution too. It's not going to help you necessarily as a homeowner or civilly, as we talked about with insurance, but the most important thing is the health and safety of the child.
Typically, when EMS responds, I'll just elaborate a little bit. I had some people ask me earlier this evening that they didn't really know the difference between a basic level EMT and an advanced paramedic. So just to kind of not give confusion to you guys, when you're calling 911, you usually will get both. Depending on who arrives at the scene first, our number one priority is scene safety. One of the advantages that we have to have police there is to secure the scene for us so that we can gain access to the patient. And as you saw in the video, when the young lady was passed out on the sofa, our first priority is the patient, but also our safety first. If EMTs arrive on the scene, they're typically going to do all the basic level care. First priority is establishing an airway on that patient. Most of you know, just from the information that you've gotten before tonight and tonight, that vomiting does occur in alcohol and overdose, and aspiration of that is certainly very deadly. We know studies have shown in our experience in resuscitation of patients in emergency medicine that there's a 30 to 70% higher morbidity rate. So we're going to establish the airway. Typically, we normally give IV fluids with dextrose, which is sugar, and in some cases even Thiamine, which is basically a vitamin for their vitamin deficiency. And these patients, being altered mental status, they will be transported. They really don't get a choice to say no in situations like that.
Scenario number 3. You're out for the evening and your child hosts a party without your knowledge or permission. The party's noisy and a neighbor calls the police. What happens when the police arrive and your child, who is over 18, allows them into your home? What happens when your child, who is under 18, answers the door? Those two scenarios.
Do you want to talk on this one?
No, I think that's you, right?
Okay, so we'll take the first part of the scenario. The police arrive, your child is there over the age of 18 and, allows whoever the responding officers are to come into the house. At that point now, if there is underage drinking going on, there's actually a couple people that can be charged at that point, because your child now is in the position of being charged with providing alcohol to other minors, and also you as a homeowner can be held liable as well if, again, there's a couple different ways that this could go, but if you are aware that they're having that party, that they are, I'm sorry, let me go back, because obviously in this particular scenario, you don't have the knowledge that this is happening, but you have to understand there's a lot of gray areas too, because if you leave a teenager home for the weekend, and you'd say they have the full range of the house and the ability to have something like that at the house, it's like I said, it becomes a gray area as to what do you know, what do you have knowledge of what could be happening in that home, and you still could be held responsible if there is a party and there's underage drinking going on. But specifically, your child over the age of 18 is going to be charged in that particular scenario. As far as what the penalties are for that, I think we're going to move on, and Scott's going to talk about that. If your child under the age of 18 answers the door, well, we're not just going to not do anything at that point because you're not there to say, come in or don't. There's going to be further action taken. Usually in a situation like that, we're going to try and get you on the phone. We're going to ask the child that answers the door, if they're going to say, oh, my parents are home, they're out for the night. Okay. Can you get them on the phone for us? And so it's not like we're just going to walk away at that point and be like, oh, all right. Now, if, for instance, they can't get you on the phone, it doesn't end there, too. There's follow-up. And John can talk about that a little bit as well, because he's done more follow-up on those types of things in the past. So I'll let him tell you a little bit about the follow-up.
Generally speaking, then I'm notified of any incident that involves anyone at the high school or juvenile-aged high school kids that are in town. And I always follow up with it after the weekend, and I'll call those parents and let them know, like, hey, just making sure, usually we contact the parents that night, and so it's not an issue, but in the cases where we're not able to, I'll reach back out to the parents and say, just wanted to speak to you because you never contacted the patrol officer that came out. Just want to make sure we're on the same page and you understand the consequences of your child hosting an underage drinking party. So.
In terms of legal implications, I think Tracy's touched on them already. Again, you're still subject to liability here, but let's talk about consent a little bit, about how police can get into the house. And it's amazing the amount of calls I get from outraged parents that, do you believe the police tried to enter my home when my son was having a party or my daughter was having a party? Yeah. Number one, if your child is 18, then you're not home, they can consent to entry of your home. If your child's under 18, as Tracy talked about, the law is less clear. If they can reach the parents, they should ask the parents for consent to enter first. If they can't reach the parent or the homeowner, there are real arguments that they can get consent from that underage person because they have control of the home at the time and the homeowner cannot be reached. The reality is that shouldn't be the focus here. I mean, it almost scares me that so much of the parents' focus, the people I talk to, is, well, can the police enter my home? The bigger question is, why do the police want to enter your home? And what are you concerned about them finding in your home? And that's really what needs to be addressed here. I just want to back up a little bit too, because we're talking about a situation where the child is home alone. We saw in this video selfies being taken or little shots taken with a passed out person. People write marker on their faces. They show up on Instagram or Snapchat or whatever else there is. And it's a big funny thing. That's not what children should be thinking. When I say children, they are children. They need to know the dangers if someone's passed out, and that needs to be the priority.
And it's important that you guys have conversations with your kids about what Scott talked about with the immunity provisions of the underage alcohol consumption statute and also the Overdose Prevention Act, because, I talk about it to the kids when they're in driver's ed and other classes that I go into, but it's important that you guys have the conversation with them to give them the resource to, I can call 911 and not get in trouble for something. All I have to do is give my name and, stay with the person that needs medical attention, and that applies to 3 to 4 people. So I always tell the kids you can't make an Excel spreadsheet at a party or something and, say none of these people should get in trouble. But it's important that you talk to your kids about calling 911 because we don't want to see a tragedy occur in town.
All right, another scenario to that would be if both parents are out, a child hosts, you don't know about it, and they allow others access to your property. And during this party, your house gets trashed. What happens then?
Okay, in this case again, patrol would respond to the party and deal with the individuals that are there. The child who hosted the party would be could be charged with hosting the underage drinking party, and obviously we're not going to investigate any criminal mischief if that child is not charged. So those two things go hand in hand, and this happens all the time. At least 2-3 times a year, there's a party that's held by freshmen or sophomores, and then seniors or juniors come to the party. And we've had cases where there was $30,000 worth of damage. We had kids that were using golf clubs to smash fine china and other assorted things. These are the things that you don't hear about. You'll hear about a couple of parties here and there, but some of the people don't want to talk about when their house gets destroyed and their $10,000 rug is ruined because kids were, pouring bleach and other things. These things happen, and they've happened, like I said, 2-3 times a year. They're going to happen a couple more times this year, and this is why we have these things, to get the knowledge out there, and so hopefully people can turn the tide, and parents aren't hosting these parties, and we're not allowing the students to have the parties in their basement.
Yeah, in terms of liability here, and we see it either the child host with the parents gone, or has made its rounds famously on Basking Ridge Moms probably a month or 2 ago. Child and mom out of town, hey, my house is open, have a party. Okay. Obviously, those who commit damage, it's criminal mischief. It's a disorderly person's offense. Starts with if it's under $200. If it's over $200, which, quite frankly, in Basking Ridge, it's going to be. it gradually increases. It can be a 4th degree, it can be a 3rd degree, it can be a 2nd degree, depending on the amount of damage. 4th degree up to 18 months in jail, 3rd degree 3 to 5 years, 2nd 5 to 10. It's criminal mischief. The child is responsible, as John indicated. The people who are at the party is responsible. As a parent, besides wanting to strangle my kid there, I'd say, hey, take a look at this. This is what your friends did. This is what you act like when you're drunk and out of control. But it does happen, and it's very common. The parent is not going to face any civil or criminal liability necessarily, but the child certainly is.
Okay, this is where the insurance guy has good news. It's not mischief, it's vandalism. Vandalism is a covered peril on every homeowner's policy. So the damage, I think the wording here was significant damage, will be covered by your homeowner's policy, subject to your deductible. Your deductible's $500, $1,000, $2,500, or whatever it might be. You're going to eat that, and the insurance company will pay for the rest. And this is not a fun claim to put in, because your insurance company is going to think, who are we insuring here? Who's our client? If you have 1 or 2 claims in the same year, or 2 or 3 in a couple-year period, you might be out on your own looking for insurance, because insurance companies are going to non-renew you. So the good news is you're covered. The bad news is you've got a deductible.
And just as an aside, I don't believe anybody ever doesn't know their kid might possibly have a party when they're out of town. They all want to have a party when we're out of town. I have never left my house for a weekend, ever. I love my children. I don't trust them as far as I can throw them. And they're good kids, but I do not trust them as far as I can throw them.
But now what happens when you're out, you tell your child they can have a couple friends over. It's okay with you if they have a few beers while they're in your home. But this time, more than a couple of friends show up and the police are called.
So there's obviously less of a chance if it's a couple friends that we're gonna end up there, because we unfortunately don't have a sixth sense about these things. We go to these parties because we're called on a noise complaint, or if it's something worse, if there's a call to 911. But we're called for a certain reason, and in this type of situation happens often enough, especially with social media. The parents go away for the weekend. Same thing. You can have just a couple friends over, and then that gets out on Twitter, whatever, and goes out to a few hundred of their friends. Pretty soon it's something that's out of control. The problem with this is here, the parents have given initial consent to their child to have others over and to let them consume alcohol on the property. So even though the parent's not home in this scenario, they've made the property available for this to happen. That's a problem, and that's something where they could be charged for that. Also, too, whoever's, again, in the moment providing the alcohol and providing the space, but in this type of situation, that permission's there. Now, you said, a couple of friends, but as we know, those things get out of hand, and if you're making it available for them, then it's available for everyone else who comes. So there's a lot of, and this is where, obviously, the criminal mischief can come in as well, and there can be a lot of worse things that can come out of something like this, but it happens a lot more often, again, because the word gets out.
And from a family systems point of view, once you abdicate responsibility and control over your kid, once you become their partner in crime, which is essentially, or partner in misdemeanor, however you want to say it, you've ceded that moral high ground, and I can tell you it is very difficult for parents to get that back. Part of a lot of the work we do in our facility is with the families as well. When an adolescent has a problem, obviously the family system has a problem. And for so long, the kids' craziness and chaos was running the show, and everybody was sort of revolving around that, orbiting around that son. And when the parents put themselves back in their rightful place of being the authority figures, kids really don't like that. And some people are afraid of their kids because they don't want their kids to get mad. And we say to them, do you know how long they'll be mad at you? Until they're not. That's how long they're going to be mad at you. It's a parent's job. It's not our job to be their friends. And so when you hear someone going, we are best friends. Okay, you might want to go to parenting school, because someday when they're older, I'm sure there'll be wonderful people to be friends with. But if kids feel safer when their parents are in charge. They won't tell you when they're adolescents. That's a secret they're going to keep. They'll tell you later. But we have kids who come in and they might complain that all of a sudden their parents are holding them to a standard and keep making them follow rules. And they say, I don't want to tell them, but I feel better at home now. I don't feel like I have to go crazy. It's your house. They're our homes. You set the rules. You're the parents. I have great respect for the Constitution of the United States. It ceases to exist at the foot of my driveway, right? This is Alendia, I am your queen. I will search your room. Search your kids' rooms, right? You have a right to, they are very good at hiding. Be better at finding. You don't ever want to be their partner in crime or say, we'll just get away with this once. There's no such thing. It's a very slippery slope.
So scenario number 4, your child hosts a party with your supervision and you check the basement before the party. You check bags to prevent alcohol, those water bottles of vodka I mentioned before, to prevent alcohol from coming in, and periodically check on the party in your basement. You determine that alcohol has made its way into your basement and some of the kids are drinking. How should you as a parent handle this situation?
Look, there's a reason, there's an expression that being a parent is the hardest job in the world. It sucks sometimes, okay? It's the greatest job in the world, it's the hardest job in the world. I mentioned the Basking Ridge mom situation before, and I certainly didn't mean to make light of that at all. In fact, I commend the parent. I sympathize with the parent, first of all. I can't even imagine coming home from being away. They didn't leave their child unattended, their child was with them. I sympathize, and I commend them for raising it as an issue in this town, because quite frankly, it sparked a big discussion. And it's a situation none of us want to be in, but we may find ourselves in. In this scenario here, congratulations for the parents. They followed the safe party guideline handout, essentially, almost to a T. They've done pretty much everything you can at the beginning to make a safe and legal environment. That said, you can't stop everything. No parent can. So what do you do in this situation? Well, it's tough. You've tried to do the right thing. But the reality is you've got to remove that alcohol from the premises if you want to protect yourself and your family. You've got to call the parents and have them pick up their kids, make sure nobody's driving home. Drunk driving is an absolute epidemic. There's no question about that. And sometimes things get out of control despite your best intentions. And that's where we have a very understanding and cooperative police department in this town. And sometimes you need to call the police on yourselves, essentially, and say this has gotten out of hand. And sometimes the police are the best people who can come out, and they're not going to say the homeowners called the parents, called the police. I'm seeing nodding heads here from my police to my right here. But you've got to control the situation before it can't be controlled. And that's the most important thing here.
We're going to hold on to, we only have 2 more scenarios left. We'll try to get through them as quickly as possible. Number 5, your child hosts a party while you're at home. You don't provide alcohol, but the kids bring water bottles full of vodka or any other alcohol and sell it to the other kids. You do not check on the party in your basement. You learn later that kids are drunk, but you don't do anything about it. No parents are contacted, and the police never show up.
Okay, I see I'm the only one on this. I can save us a whole lot of time. Refer to what I've just said in the past 2 things. Your kids feel safer when you are in charge. And honestly, we all have bottled water in our homes. If children are walking into your house with bottles no, I'm good, I have it. They don't. Smell it, taste it. That's it. Again, my house, my rules. You can go somewhere else if you don't want to be here. But one thing I will point out, people told me when my kids are little, that you will be shocked at the parents that serve alcohol, and they were absolutely right. As my kids became teenagers, I have been shocked by the parents that have allowed alcohol to be served in their homes. It's incredible. And I just want to say how impressed I am that your town is having this dialogue and speaking so openly. I might really just have to move here. It's great. It's really great. Yeah, I did.
But now what if someone gets seriously injured or even dies after leaving the party?
All right, and this is the nightmare scenario that no one ever wants to see happen. And depending on what the circumstance is, maybe the person leaves the house, drives, and dies in an accident on the way home. There was a situation in Millburn where someone left a house party and killed someone else on the way home. Either way, you're talking about a catastrophic incident that would change the town and all the students for the worse. In this incident, if the person died in a car accident, we obviously would investigate the car accident. But the biggest thing is, again, the homeowner. The homeowner who knew that this was going on, who just turned a blind eye. Obviously, they'd be charged with hosting an underage drinking party, and that endangering statute would again come in to play. And this would be the biggest thing. To me, it just doesn't make any sense. I can't fathom that a parent wouldn't knowingly allow people to drink in their basement and then walk home, drive home. They don't know, right? Because we're going to stick our head in the sand and, well, whatever's going on down there is going on down there. You know, in terms of our investigation, that's pretty much the extent of our investigation, but I just want you guys to know that there's enough stuff that we deal with on the Mondays after the weekends that comes from these parties. So I just wanted to reiterate that.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at criminal and civil liability. Inaction with knowledge is almost the same thing as deliberate action on your part. You know, the old ostrich in the sand, or the Sergeant Schultz from Hogan Heroes, I know nothing, I know nothing. Young kids have no idea what I'm talking about. Doesn't exist anymore, okay? It just doesn't fly. Look, these are not made up, far-fetched scenarios. As we've heard Dr. Silverman down there, and I know personally I probably shouldn't say this tonight, but look, kids are going to drink at times. It's going to happen, okay? We've seen the stats. I know it's 21 for a reason. I support that. In an ideal world, and what we can push for that, 100%. But there are going to be situations that arise. As a dad and as a lawyer especially, I see it, and I see it every day. I get the picture, and I ask that we all be responsible and do what we can to keep these kids safe. And unfortunately, like Dr. Silverman, I've seen the tragedies, the victims of sexual assault, the parents of badly injured children, the face of a young man from Warren who was driving home from a party, good kid in college, and he crashed. And his best friend was in the passenger seat, and his best friend died. Now that kid has to deal with not only the death of his best friend, but he wound up in state prison. This was a well-educated, great kid. These are real things that happen here. These are images that are embedded in my mind forever, Dr. Silverman's mind, I'm sure, forever, and ones that I wouldn't wish on any of you. So with all of these scenarios here, think parents. And let's do what we can to protect these kids, and in the process, protect you guys as well.
In our experience in EMS, when we're called to situations like this, we've seen serious injuries result from it. I've actually known people, or histories of certain patients that I've treated where they tried to get up and walk, they were unable to walk, they fell down a flight of stairs. Mentally, they're not capable to be in control of all their mental capacities. Some serious head trauma. We've seen some bleeding into the brain and serious head trauma from accidental injuries involving alcohol. And possibly even death can result. As I said a few minutes ago, you know, the aspiration is a big one. You know, basic first aid, we would think everybody would know that you never want an unconscious patient just to be laying on their floor, especially if you suspect alcohol or drug overdose. But sometimes people don't think that way. They don't think the way we think, and they don't realize the impacts of aspiration of the vomit. If we arrive too late to a scene and they've already aspirated and they're in a full-blown cardiac arrest, we have very little chance to really revive them and bring them back if there's been a delay, because most of you know when the heart stops pumping blood, and Dr. Silverman could back me up on this very easily, you're looking at permanent brain damage. You're looking at permanent organ damage in their body from a lack of oxygen. So you really do need to be aware of the impacts of injuries that happen. And you know, don't say it can't happen in my house, because I've been in people's houses on calls where we've seen it. And we need to be prepared and hopefully prevent those permanent injuries. And if they survive, they're going to be living with that injury the rest of their life, and their life is going to be greatly impacted from that.
Thanks. Yeah, Ken is absolutely right. So I was asked to comment on examples of what has happened. So they come in, they die, I got nothing for you. You're dead. So that's the easy one. Unfortunately, we ain't bringing you back at that point. However, there are a lot of people that come in that haven't died. And this is, and I was asked to comment on some things, including stomach pumping. And this is where we get to do show and tell. I love show and tell. That's the one part I can have fun. Now, you guys in the back, I'm sorry, you stayed in the back. You probably won't see show and tell. So, Ken could talk about some examples. So they asked me to talk about, we don't do it very much or very often, thank goodness. I don't have to, but they asked me to talk about stomach pumping. Volunteers, Tommy? But it's bad when I don't see people's names in the list. So this is an example of what we use in stomach pumping. Imagine this going into you, down your nose, into your stomach, where we gotta either take anything out. Oftentimes it's not just alcohol, it's pills. If we do it, which again, as I said, we don't often do it anymore, but it's something that we may have to do occasionally, or putting in things like charcoal into your stomach to prevent you from getting more absorption of something that's too much. So also, a classic example, I mean, Ken could mention what this is. How many often have you put this in? This is not uncommon, actually. This is something, it's a nasal airway. It's something they put in when they're not breathing real well. You wake up with one of these in your nose, you do not forget it. It is not comfortable. Anybody want to try it? So why would you set yourself up to do that? And lastly, and certainly on my world leastly, you peed on yourself. We take this and we put it into your orifice, to help you pee. You're not waking up with this in it, you're not going to be comfortable. Again, not something, if anybody's had it, they enjoy. So those are some examples of some things we occasionally have to do. Don't put yourself and your kids in that situation. As parents, don't let your kids get in that situation.
Okay, I'm always last. How is insurance going to respond when that guest gets seriously hurt or dies after the party? Back to intentional. If you knew about it, there's going to be no coverage. If it has anything to do with a vehicle, there's going to be no coverage. But if that guest does get hurt or worse after the party, and it happened, the alcohol was consumed at your residence, your homeowner's policy will very likely respond with defense and any penalties. But then what? That is a very nasty claim, and an insurance company, just like in my last example, is going to remember that. And you come up for renewal, and they're going to look, we paid $500,000 to defend, and another $500,000 in a judgment against the homeowners, and that insurance company is not going to want you around any longer. Now you have to go shopping for insurance. Do you know what goes with you? Your history. Now you have to explain to a new homeowners company, oh yeah, I had $1 million claim last year. You think they're going to want to insure you? No. I don't want to do doom and gloom. We're doing enough of that here tonight. The idea is there is coverage in places, then there's some that it's not. You need to know where you're covered and where you're not.
Scenario 6, several parents are out to dinner and the topic of underage drinking comes up. One parent states that their kids should drink before college so that they'll learn to their tolerance level and they don't go wild in college. Plus they learn how to drink while they're still at home. Another parent disagrees because of the law and the impacts to the kids' brains. So what does drinking before age 21 do to children's brains?
Best case scenario is if EMS can get there soon enough to begin treating that individual. But we really rely on the community board because someone needs to be aware of what's going on in your house. We can't be there to help if someone is not there to check on the kids and basically be aware that they need help. It's one of those situations where I'm even experiencing it now with our daughter, being that she's 12, and she kind of, I guess all of you who have 12-year-olds agree with me that she thinks she knows everything at this age. There's a lot of drama involved behind that, but, you know, We have sleepovers. Our daughter has friends over in our basement, and we've had as many as, I don't know how many girls, but more than I can probably count. And I go down and check on them, and our daughter gets very upset with me and gets embarrassed that I go down and check, and I don't care. Because it's all about safety with me. It's been my life with safety, and I'm always worried about other people's kids in my house. There's no drinking as of yet, and hopefully there won't be, but someone could fall, someone could get hurt. There is some liability there. And the worst case scenario really would be the scenario that you saw in the video where nobody checked on that young lady, and by the time they did check on her and get somebody there, it was too late. So parents need to be aware. They need to be more proactive, and not everybody is pro-safety, but it should be something you should put in your mind and know what's happening in your house. And check on the kids just to make sure they're all breathing, and make sure that you know how to get us there quickly if there is a situation where they need help. Unfortunately, the rumor is that EMS saves everybody, but the reality is we don't. And we need help from you guys to help us get us there and treat people that need our help.
Let's put a fallacy to bed. Learning to drink does not prevent binge drinking in college. It doesn't make them any smarter. God knows. Listen, adolescents are dumb enough. No offense to any of the adolescents. I was dumb when I was an adolescent too. Sometimes my kids think I still am. There are European countries whose kids grow up drinking alcohol. The French, probably the Irish. I'll take one for the team. I'll take one for my people. We drink. Germany. France I know for sure, and I'm sorry I didn't have time to check all the stats. France has a higher rate of college-age binge drinking than does the United States. Okay, so growing up in a situation where one might have wine with dinner, or in an Italian home having wine with holidays and such, doesn't really seem to teach people to drink. We learn to drink in sippy cups. You put it up here, you put it in here, you're drinking, okay? It's a sense of educating your kids to stay sober, especially for the girls, stay sober, stay in a pack. Things happen everywhere, and especially giving that lesson for when they go to college. You don't have your friends with you here, not in the beginning of your freshman year anyway. You don't have your friends with you. We can look at fraternity hazing rituals. There's been a trial that'll be going on soon for these kids from CUNY, I think, that went out to East Stroudsburg or somewhere in the Poconos, and they did hazing. A kid died, and they're all being criminally charged. Alcohol is involved in virtually all of these things. So teaching somebody to drink, I get the concept from a logic point of view, but it doesn't hold. It doesn't apply, and it doesn't help. For the girls, stay sober, stay in a pack. If Natalie Holloway had followed that advice, she probably wouldn't be dead today. Right? They think they're immune. That's the other part of being a teenager. It won't happen to me. It'll happen to somebody else. Right? Really important. And just as an aside to the things that happen, if somebody dies at your party or there's a car accident, PTSD doesn't just happen to the people who experience the accident. A lot of times you can have an experience from peripherally, maybe the kid whose party it was at or their best friend who was driving. Secondary PTSD is a very real thing, and the stats on that are the same as Dr. Silverman pointed out. Okay, real stuff.
Our last scenario for this evening would be in considering the differing parental views on alcohol before. Many parents become upset that their friends think it's okay to serve alcohol to other people's children, especially their own. How do we as parents handle the situation with other parents?
I'm a little more blunt than most. You probably figured that out already, but you have to live in the community. Your kids have to live in the community, right? So some of it is by starting when your kids are young, casual conversation, and a lot of times people in our community give us plenty to talk about as examples. So if something happens and people hear about, hey, did you hear what happened down at the Kellys? Wow, I would never want that to happen. Let's make a pact. I will never serve your kids. You will never serve mine. And that is one small thing we did in Chatham that we did right, was a lot of parents jumped on saying, I am going to be a safe house. I will never serve alcohol to my kids, to your kids, or to any other child that comes in, and I will take steps to make sure that if it comes in, I get it right out and we don't accept it. So some of that is kind of a community thing, and we have enough social groups in our communities that we could easily get that rolling. You know, we put it together on a Facebook group when our kids were younger, and it was very effective. Because kids are no longer on Facebook and they don't want to be our Facebook friends anyway. You find that out after you comment once, and then they defriend you. So that works nicely.
Just to add one thing to that too is, you know, if you don't know the parents and if you're not making that pact, you can at least ask the question, because I've said this before. I think you know, a lot of parents will say, you know, if their child's going to a party, you might ask the child, are the parents going to be there? And that's the end of the questioning, because if they say yes, then okay, great. And then the next question needs to be, is there going to be alcohol there? And you're going to get the same look I got, like you know, come on, I just told you the parents are going to be there. Doesn't matter. And you know, whether our kids are looking at us that way because there really isn't going to be alcohol there, or, you know, they're just, you know, trying to make it sound like that, you know, we don't know what we're talking about, we have to go further with those questions.
And then don't be afraid to call the house. Oh, I'll just give them a call. No. Then you know.
Then you have your answer.
Yeah.
And to that note, I also wanted to mention that Parents for Substance-Free Kids, they're the first table if you walk out to your left. They have information on Safe Homes, which is a program where you sign up and you say that I'm going to have a safe house and I'm not going to serve alcohol to underage students. And if you want more information on how to sign up for that, the table has all that information. So that's the end of the scenarios. And last presentation for this evening before question and answer, I'm going to call up 2 members of Bridge Against Alcohol and Drugs, and they're just going to kind of close out the presentation portion. Okay?
Hi, I'm Izzy DePaulo. I am a student representative on the Berners Township Municipal Alliance, and I am a member of leadership in Ridge Against Alcohol and Drugs, otherwise known as RAD.
And I am Tommy Blanchard. I am leadership in Ridge Against Alcohol and Drugs. We would like to start off tonight by saying how grateful we are to be allowed to speak at this event. We all strongly believe, RAD, that the ideas presented tonight that so many of you do believe in, that social hosting is not just wrong, it's very dangerous.
Social hosting leads teens to believe that it's okay to drink, and if that night nothing goes wrong, then it allows parents the opportunity to believe that it is okay to let their teens and their friends drink. As teenagers, our minds are very pliable, and we may not know it or understand it, but it's true. Parents serving alcohol has become a norm for many high school parties, and this adds a form of peer pressure, not only from other high school students, but from parents. Parents are hung up on the fact that students are being pressured by other high schoolers when it's really not only them. A high schooler will see not only their friend drinking, but their friend's parents saying it's okay and drinking with them. How is any child supposed to say no when adults are telling them that drinking is okay? Parents may be doing this because they want their child to be cool, or they think that it's safer for them to drink at home. But in reality, these kids should not be drinking at all, and these parents are only setting a bad example. Parents are supposed to protect children, not expose them to potential dangers.
When a parent serves alcohol, they are telling the kids that if they stay at this party, then they can drink as much as they want. The teens will then begin to think that drinking before the legal age of 21 is okay because they drank at their friend's party and nothing bad happened that time. Obviously, then it can't be bad ever. Some parents believe that they are preparing their kids for college, and by allowing them and their friends to break the law does not prepare them for college. It simply allows them an excuse to party. If you want your child to be prepared for college, talk to them. Try to convince your child to wait until they're 21. But if you truly think that they will not wait until they're 21, and you think teaching them is the way to go about it, you do not need to get your child drunk, and you do not need to serve to other children that are not yours. Another important thing to note is the use of fake IDs by high school students. Check your students' wallets, make sure that they don't have these items on them. The use of fake IDs in liquor stores becoming lenient could add to our underage drinking problem. We in Ridge Against Alcohol and Drugs hope to address the problem of fake IDs in our 2015-2016 action plan.
As teens attend more of these parties, use fake IDs, and binge drink, they start to get the idea that they can handle a drink, or two, or three, or four, and that number continues to grow rapidly until things go wrong. In our society today, it unfortunately takes an unexpected and devastating event for a big change to happen, whether that be a car crash, a drug raid, or even a death. We are here to try and prevent another tragedy and make change without one.
Fortunately, we do have panels such as these, or the one held last April, Out of the Mouth of Teens, from Ridge Against Alcohol and Drugs. We believe that these panels are a marvel because they spread information about underage drinking and the effects of alcohol. And that is a stepping stone to solving the underage drinking problem in Basking Ridge.
We strongly believe in the philosophy and Bernards Township Municipal Alliance campaign that is, it's 21 for a reason. This led to our teen panel back in the spring about high school drinking and to this event tonight. We encourage all of you here tonight to spread the information you have learned. It is not only our mission, but our job as a community to come together to solve this problem. Without your continued support, nothing will ever change. So please, stand strong with us and make a difference.
We would now like to hand the microphone back to our moderators for some questions.
What do you think about how